All right, this is going to be a bit of an educational one. I'll interact with the chat if anybody comes on later on, but it's not the primary aim, really. I'm doing this video to try and put all in one place, in one video, the reasons why Sedevacantism is the only Catholicism left, and why only Sedevacantists are actually practicing Catholics. Obviously, this is going to ruffle some feathers. Most of all, the fakers and deceivers, which are pretending to be Catholic, that keep telling you that Bergoglio is Pope. So, I'm going to do this in a very methodical way. You can check everything that I'm going to say, that it's accurate. You can verify everything I'm going to tell you on your own. I'll give you some pointers. Obviously, as per the notes for this video, if you want a real, complete, detailed information with lots of references, then my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church, which you can get on Amazon, or you can go a little bit cheaper if you get the digital version from my e-store. Both links are in the description of this video. That'll give you even more detailed information. But what I'm going to do today is just going to give a rundown of Sedevacantism and Catholicism, and why they're one and the same, and why anything else, including the Novus Ordo fake Catholic Church, is not Catholic, or indeed a church, other than possibly Satanism. So, a couple of things that you need to know before we begin anything. One, the Catholic Church uses Roman law. The difference between Roman law and Anglo-Saxon law, American law, British law, whatever, is that while all these other legal systems borrowed from Roman law, they're all quite different. In that in Roman law, what applies is the principle is applied first, and then the details of each case are looked at individually for each case. So there is no real such thing as a past case influencing a present case. So for example, in the States especially, most people will tend to go for a deal because the penalties for certain crimes or the punishment for certain crimes is always the same. So if it's like you get caught with a certain amount of, I don't know, marijuana, after the third time you get, a lot bigger sentence and so on. While in Roman law, each case gets looked at on its merits. So I'm going to make an extreme example, but for example, like in Anglo-Saxon law, murder is murder, and you're going to get a minimum of 10 to 25 years or the death penalty, depending on the severity of it. But it's a mandatory minimum 10 years no matter what. In Roman law, if you end up killing a serial killer that was raping and killing children, it's up to the judge, and he can basically say, yes, you did cause a murder, but time served, 6 months, whatever, some community service. While if you kill a little old lady to steal her pension, you get life or the electric chair. So that is a very important difference, because Roman law is based on logic. It's very humane in that it's based on logic and justice a lot more than any Anglo-Saxon legal system. That's an important thing to keep in mind for when we get into the details of some of the canon law and so on. Another thing which people, especially Protestants, have been guilty of lying about for centuries, literally, and you don't have to take my word for it. There are even Protestants, like Rodney Stark, who have written whole books about bearing false witness. That's the name of his book, from Rodney Stark. Buy it, read it. And these are the lies that Protestants have been saying about Catholicism and Catholics for literally centuries, that are completely debunked. They're lies, but a lot of people still believe them. The classical one is, we worship Mary. It's nonsense. Never happened. But or we put Mary above Jesus. Again, nonsense. It's a lie. But I'm not going to go into those details. You can look those up on your own. The point is that Catholicism has essentially had the same dogmatic principles and beliefs from the very beginning. And here the Protestants are all going to freak out and say, no, you guys come out at papal encyclicals and you changed this and you said Mary was a virgin and then you made Vatican I and blah, blah, blah. No. The Catholic Church has always held the same beliefs. Mary was a virgin and was deemed to have been a virgin throughout her life, even after Jesus was born. The Protestants don't believe that because of some bad interpretation of biblical works, which they always, say that, Bible alone. Of course, the Protestant Bible has been changed long before it was translated by King James, who was a flaming homosexual who didn't really like the Catholics, and he started the Freemasonic temples. So, little known fact, the so-called King James version of the Bible was edited by Pharisees for 700 years. Then it was edited by King James interpreters who created 33,000 errors of translation, including in the Ten Commandments, reduced a lot the presence of Mary, changed a lot of the stuff in it. And then, of course, we've got Martin Luther, which ripped out 7 books from the Bible, changed it, and then said only the Bible counts. His Bible, presumably. And of course, the Protestants say that, only the Bible is God-breathed. Again, presumably the Luther Bible that was altered first by the Pharisees for 700 years and then by Luther himself. And of course, when Bruce Jenner comes along and decides to take Leviticus out, I guess that would be God-breathed too. Personally, I think all Protestant theology is very much God-farted. But again, going a little bit off the topic. The point is, what has happened, especially because of Protestants, the Bible has been misinterpreted, changed, and Catholicism, Christianity has been perverted by Gnostics, magicians. They talk about this in the Bible itself, and of course Protestants for the last 500 years, which have changed the zeitgeist of Christianity throughout the planet with their 40,000 denominations. But because of this, what has happened is that popes produce papal encyclicals, that is, ex cathedra pronouncements on faith and morals. And the Catholic belief is that when a pope says this is the rule officially, as in from his chair of Peter, and says that officially, that is infallible. Not because the pope is infallible. We've had popes that have been flagrant homosexuals, power-hungry, dictators, backstabbers. We've had all sorts of bad guys. There were valid popes. Why were they valid? Because despite the fact that they were not necessarily good men or even good Catholics, they did not alter the dogma of the church. They did not try and change any dogmatic principles of the church. So that clearly shows that Catholics don't believe popes are infallible. What we believe is that when the Pope pronounces something officially from his chair of Peter, that is infallible. Not because of the Pope, but because Jesus promised that he would be with us till the end of days, which means Jesus instituted the Catholic Church through Peter, the first of the apostles, which was also the first Pope. And we've had popes ever since. And again, another thing that the Protestants try and pretend didn't happen is that the whole of Christianity was only Catholic for over 1,000 years, with popes, with transubstantiation of the Mass, with Mary being a virgin throughout. All of those things were always there for over 1,000 years. And then the first schism happened with the Eastern Orthodox because of politics and power and their lies. And also theological. It wasn't about theology, actually. The theological principles, most people don't even know what they are. And if you do look into them, the so-called Eastern Orthodox are actually wrong about it, blatantly wrong. It's quite clear in the Bible that they're wrong. But it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with power struggles and Byzantine power plays and whatever. 40 years after they split from the proper Catholic Church, the Muslims were invading them, kicking their ass. And what did they do? They cried help from the Catholics, who went there, saved them, saved their city, took back their towns, and were giving them back to the Eastern Catholics, to the Eastern Orthodox, sorry. But the Eastern Orthodox backstabbed them, did not provide any of the help, food, water, soldiers that they said they would. And not only that, but they made alliances with the Muslims to kill the Catholics. So you're in trouble, you call me for help, I come to help you, and then you pair up with the guy that was kicking your ass to backstab me. And they did that throughout the First Crusade. They did that throughout the Second Crusade. They did that throughout the Third Crusade. Then the Fourth Crusade came along, and the Venetians were a bit pissed off by now, and they sacked Constantinople. Mildly, by the way, as far as sacking of a city goes, they were really pretty decent about it. And the Eastern Orthodox are still squealing now about, oh, how the Catholics beat us, and then, they robbed us, and they crushed Constantinople. Well, again, Catholics are too pious and too gentle and too kind, because if I'd been one of the princes in the First Crusade, and that happened to my guys, I would have razed Constantinople to the ground, and I would have sown salt in it so that there is no city left. That's what I would have done if I was the head of the Crusaders in the First Crusade. Never mind the fourth one, right? So another 500 years go by, and pretty much the theological difference between East and West, anyway, were relatively minor. Then along comes the Protestants. Their 40,000 denominations, like mushrooms and bacteria, just keeps reproducing and creating all sorts of nonsense, including, transgender bishops and what have you, whatever. Anyway, the point is that because of all this Gnosticism, fakery, invaders, Satanists, from time to time the popes had to issue various encyclicals clarifying anything that has always been clear, has always been performed in a certain way or believed in a certain way. But in comes the Protestants trying to confuse the stuff, so the Pope says, no, let's be very clear about this. And one of these things that they're very clear about, for example, is that anyone who publicly defects from the faith clearly is no longer Catholic. Again, this doesn't take a genius to figure out. And it was Pope Paul IV, I believe, shortly after Protestantism popped its ugly head up, that issued a papal encyclical called Cum ex apostolato officio, which basically says anyone who stops behaving like a Catholic publicly and starts behaving like a heretic publicly and notoriously is no longer a Catholic. Again, you can be a valid elected priest, pope, bishop, whatever, right? You can be a valid priest. If you start murdering babies on the altar, guess what? You're no longer Catholic, okay? Again, not rocket science, all right? That's all that Cum ex apostolato officio said. It was about 2.5 pages, and it's very, very detailed, and it makes it really clear that it doesn't matter what your level or rank is. You can be a lowly deacon and you can be the Pope. If you break this rule, you are heretic, and everybody must treat you like a heretic, and anybody that accepts you as though you're not a heretic themselves becomes a heretic. And it is also clear, it specifically states that heretics shall be deprived of all common human decency and kindness, because they are there to try and destroy souls. So this has always been a principle in Catholicism, but in about the 1500s something, it was made into a rule that was very clearly spelled out, just in case anybody was confused. And that's all that papal encyclicals did. So Catholicism in itself is not really difficult to know what it is. It's the credo of the apostles, essentially, the 10 Commandments, and essentially that's basically it. I mean, illiterate peasants were good Catholics for centuries, millennia, in fact. So you don't need to be a genius to know what it means to be Catholic. However, if you get into the particulars of it, and especially when you get, these Gnostics, Protestants, etc., that will try and confuse the waters, and they will say, oh, but there is this thing here has a comma, and therefore that can mean. So over the millennia, 2 millennia, various rules, papal encyclicals, and so on were issued that clarified the position of essentially the Bible and the tradition that put the Bible together. Because let's not forget, the Bible was put together by Catholics about 300 years after Jesus ascended. Again, something that the Protestants don't like to talk about. But, the Bible was put together through oral and written tradition, and it was compiled by Catholics who had popes, bishops, transubstantiation, etc. So, we're now reached a point where you don't have to take my word for it, but that's the case. However, over 2 millennia, all these encyclicals and so on, they became, a lot of work to do for a layman, say, if you wanted to know the exact position and the exact detail of how did this rule come about. You didn't necessarily have access to the Vatican archives and so on. Over the centuries, various people tried to create a code of canon law that encompassed all of these things. There was quite a good one, a Venetian one in about the 1500s. But Pope Pius X, in the early 1900s, when he saw the infiltration of the church that had been started and been going on for almost 200 years already by the Illuminati, Satanists, and so on, decided to commission the creation of the Code of Canon Law, this book right here. This is the 1917 Pio Benedictine Code of Canon Law. This book, this text, is the most vetted document on earth, because they literally put together a commission of various cardinals, headed by a guy called Cardinal Gaspari, and they went through tens of thousands of documents to make sure that none of the documents contradicted each other, none of the papal encyclicals contradicted each other, that all the rulings that had been passed from the Catholic Church, various popes, over 200 and something popes, 260 popes at that time, all fit together. And they did. But they double-checked this by going through, like I said, not a few thousand documents, multiple tens of thousands of documents. I don't remember the exact figure. I think it was something like 26,000 documents to put it together, and then another 20 or 30 or whatever to double-check everything. And once they put it together, by that time Pope Pius X had died, Pope Benedictine XV had come in, which is why it's called Pio Benedictine Code of Canon Law, because two popes were responsible. Pius started it, Benedictine finished it, with the same group of cardinals. So after this massive work of putting this thing together by going through all the various different rulings of the church to make sure that they all fit together, and they put all in one book, that's it. So all the rules of the Catholic Church from its very beginning right up to 1917 are in one document, right here. And it's based on Roman law. If you read this document, and if you're in any way familiar with legal documents, which I am, because I worked in doing that for some 40 years now, it's a brilliant, pristine, clean, logical document. All the rulings in there that are connected to each other, they all make perfect sense. The logic is ironclad. It's beautiful. And in fact, I would put it to you that it is so perfect because it is divinely inspired. Now, keep in mind that in Catholicism we have something called the magisterium of the Church. Just like we say, when the Pope makes a pronouncement officially, it's going to be infallible. Not because the Pope is infallible, but because Jesus doesn't lie to us. He's not messing around with us. Said, which one of the 40,000 denomination of... And I'm back. Sorry for the interruption. I was getting to a pivotal point, so let me repeat a little bit of where I was. Yeah, suspicious timing indeed on the internet, rural. So, just to quickly recap, in case you missed out 20 seconds or so. Let me just tell the chat that I'm here. So, just to recap quickly, the Code of Canon Law, this document here, had been put together by studying tens of thousands of documents. I think it's upward of 46,000 documents that span the period of 2,000 years. And it was all compiled correctly in a beautiful document that flows logically in a way that I've never seen anywhere in any contract in my 40 plus years of reading contracts. So what did they do after they did all of this double checking, making sure it's all correct? Well, that was in 1917. Then what did they do? They went to all the academics, all theologians, and all clergy, and they said, here's the new Code of Canon Law, read through it. If you've got any questions, if you think there's anything in here that's an error, get back to us and we'll check it out. And the same group of cardinals was the group of cardinals instituted originally by Pius X and continued by Pope Benedictine XV to double check and make sure that they were the guys that were in charge of making sure that the interpretation of the Code of Canon Law was down to them. And only they could decide what was right. In other words, what I'm saying to you is this Code of Canon Law absolutely has the imprimatur, the absolute work of the infallible magisterium of the Church. Remember what I said. It's not that the people are infallible. It's not that any pope is infallible. It's that when you're producing an official document from the Catholic Church that states these are the rules officially, it cannot contain error, because Jesus does not lie to us, and he told us that he will be with us till the end of time, and therefore there is a supernatural protection on the magisterium of the Church. That all that the magisterium of the Church means is the official position of the Church is infallible. Which of course means there are positions of the Church which are not part of the magisterium of the Church, which can be in error, or which can change over time, or which are not related to the divinity of God and his rules, and only have to do with the management of the actual church stuff. And those things can change over time. They're not, chiseled in stone, so to speak. But the rules in the Code of Canon Law are infallible because they're put together by the magisterium of the Church. So from 1917 until 1958, when Pope Pius XII died, so we're talking a period of 41 years, any academic that was theologically, from all the universities and so on, any priest, any bishop, any cardinal could question this thing or ask for clarity or ask for clarification. And this happened for 41 years. And guess what? How many changes were there in this thing? One change to only part 2 of Code 1099, and that was done by Pope Pius himself, who literally changed like about 2 or 3 words just to make sure it was even clear. Okay, because the language in this document is absolutely phenomenal. It is, words are used carefully. You see this stack of books at the back here? That's the Oxford Dictionary of English, and it's 13 volumes. And, I've had people that only speak English. I've had people that pride themselves on being, very grammatically and educated. And I've had to correct them on the meaning of actual words, because I read a lot and I actually speak English really quite well, and I use it quite carefully. So the point is that the language in this document is based on Roman law, as I said, and it's a pristine document in which no changes really, essentially, were required after 41 years of study. What happened in 1958? Pope Pius dies, the last valid pope, and Roncalli comes up. Now, internet connection again. Now, keep in mind that in 1958, this document has all the rules of Catholicism in it. Yeah, it's valid, it's correct, nobody's found any fault in it. In 1958, that is the monolithic, gigantic fortress of Catholicism, which is a work that has never been repeated and has never been done before or since, to create a document of that depth of investigation, if you like. So the rules are very clear. And the rules in there say that Canon 188, Part 4, which refers to cum ex apostolato officio. Remember that document that I said that Pope Paul IV created in about the 1500 something to fight back against the nonsense that the Protestants were spouting. But essentially the Protestants and the Novus Ordo demonic Satanists pretending to be Catholic clergy today are basically saying, oh, no, once you're a priest, you're always a priest, and once you're a bishop, you're always a bishop, and which, if you look at it logically, what would that mean? That would mean that if Bergoglio starts sacrificing babies on the altar, he's still the Pope. No, he's not, because when you stop being Catholic, guess what? You're not Catholic. And if you publicly create documents that have absolute heresy in them, which Vatican II documents all have, there are 16 documents. 15 of those documents have got direct heresy in them. I've gone through every one of them in my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church. You can look it up and go through them. And even then, I did not pick out every single heresy in every single document. I just picked out several very clear examples in each document. 15 of them have got direct heresy. One document, Inter Mirifica, does not have direct heresy in it, because all that the document says is that all the other 15 documents need to be spread around the world by every means possible present at that day and time and in the future. So it's basically saying spread the heresy. So it's not direct heresy, it's indirect heresy, because it's saying spread the heresy. Now, Vatican documents issued by the Vatican are meant to be for the whole world. You cannot become more public than that. And when you issue heretical documents, well, that makes you a heretic, which means you're no longer Catholic. So Roncalli, and here's where the Protestants and the Novus Ordo deceivers try and lie to you, right? They say, Roncalli was a valid pope. This is so-called John the 23rd. Keep in mind that Roncalli took the name John the 23rd. John the 23rd existed already. John the 23rd was one of the more than 40 anti-popes that was judged to be an anti-pope way back when, and he took the name of a heretic anti-pope just to prove a point. He was also a Freemason, which has been confirmed, and he wasn't actually voted in as pope. Giuseppe Siri was, which is why the white smoke came out in 1958, then the black smoke, then the white smoke. Giuseppe Siri was supposed to be pope, but they threatened him with killing all the bishops in the East if he didn't abdicate in secret. So they made Roncalli the pope. And the Protestant Novus Orchians will say, oh, well, we can't prove he was a Freemason. And well, you can't prove that Giuseppe Siri was voted in, because actually we can. There are now FBI documents that tell us that. And we know that Roncalli was a Freemason because, well, he's getting like Freemasonic stuff done to him on photograph. Back then, when photographs were still valid something. But it doesn't matter. That's not the reason that we can absolutely, with absolute certainty, say that Roncalli was a fake pope. The reason is, and this is undeniable and you can't escape from it, Roncalli, before he died, approved the final version of two of the Vatican II documents. One of which is Inter Mirifica, which you could say, well, that doesn't have direct heresy, but the other one does. And that, in and of itself, makes him a heretic. That's it. You don't have to even talk about him being a Freemason. You don't even have to talk about him having blackmailed Giuseppe Siri into not becoming the actual Pope. It doesn't matter. He approved the final version of a heretical document, which makes him a heretic. Post-mortem. By the way, a lot of the previous anti-popes that have happened before 1958, of which there are more than 40, most of them were all declared anti-popes post-mortem. So there's nothing new in this. It's been done before. Roncalli was a heretic. Who came up next? Pope Paul VI, i.e. Montini. We do not call heretics by pope names. Montini came up, and what did Montini do? Montini produced the other 14 heretical documents, every single one of them, of Vatican II, and changed the Mass. Any one of these things automatically makes him a heretic right away. Why? Well, you produce heretical documents, public documents, you keep saying that they are valid, they're not, it's nonsense, it's absolute lies, it's heresy, you're a heretic. You change the Mass. The Mass cannot be changed. There is a papal encyclical called Quo Primum that absolutely states the Mass stays as it is. It's been in this format for, since the beginning, and anyone that tries to change it is a heretic, and he did, so he is a heretic. So, he is a heretic. Now what happens? Now you've got Vatican II. Anybody that accepts heresy, remember, cum ex apostolato officio, anybody that accepts heresy as being valid and continues to promote it, themselves becomes a heretic. So what does this mean? That the entirety of the Vatican, all of the clergy that continue to promote Vatican II are absolutely heretics. Therefore, they are no longer Catholics. Therefore, even if they were valid before, they've fallen out. They're no longer valid Catholics. They're no longer valid bishops. They're no longer valid priests, which means that they cannot create other bishops or other priests. Any priest, any bishop that has been taken holy orders from these heretics is not actually a validly ordained priest or bishop. And remember, even the Pope is only a bishop. Which means what? Which means that, well, all the clergy of the so-called Novus Ordo Church, that is the church that promotes Vatican II and the fake Mass, are all heretics. They are not clergy. They're not even Catholic. Never mind clergymen. Well, that means that the church is defected. No, it does not. And here are now the reasons. The enemies of the church will say, oh, this guy, with his red hoodie and his red glasses, he thinks he has the authority to judge who the Pope is. No, that's another lie, another sophistic lie that they come up with. I don't decide anything. I'm a layman. I follow the infallible magisterium of the church that tells me that people who behave like Roncalli, Montini, Wojtyla, the other fake popes, including Bergoglio, Ratzinger, all these guys, anyone that behaves like those guys is not Catholic and is not a clergyman. So I'm following the rules that the church, the infallible church, has told me I should follow. I'm being a good Catholic and I'm saying those guys are all heretics and everything they say is completely irrelevant. Some aborigine in the Amazon has got just as much right to be Pope as all of these heretics. In fact, possibly more, because they might have a conscience. These guys are Satanists, so they don't. Oh, but then if you don't have a Pope, the church collapses. Again, absolute nonsense. Do you know how many times the church has not had a Pope? Over 264 times. Because that's roughly how many popes have been there since the beginning. Guess what happens when a Pope dies? There's no one at the head of the church. And it's called an interregnum, from the Latin, between realms, because popes are also considered kind of kings. And therefore, until a valid pope is elected, you are in interregnum. What happens when you're in interregnum? What happens when you're in interregnum is that bishops, priests, etc., no longer have any jurisdictional authority. What does that mean? A bishop usually has authority over a certain area, geographic area, and priests under him and so on, and he can make decisions on his own authority. Still stems from the Pope. The Pope has got the ultimate authority and is the ultimate jurisdiction for the entire church. But when there is no Pope, bishops do not have the authority to really do anything other than give sacraments, just like priests. However, what does happen and what used to happen, and remember, anything that happened before in the church cannot be invalidated by what happens in the future, and vice versa. The future cannot invalidate the past cannot invalidate the future. The rules of the church have to stay the same, and they have. So what used to happen? A pope died back in the day. You might not know for a year that the pope died because you were in some remote place, like trying to be a missionary or whatever. And in the meantime, a bishop is elected. Now, bishops need to be ordained by other bishops, and there is a procedure for this. You don't need to ask the Pope for permission. You can just do this on your own cognizance if you're a bishop. And that bishop is considered valid because in Roman law you have silent assent. What does silent assent mean? The Romans used to say silence is the equivalence to agreement. So you can ordain new bishops, you can ordain new priests and so on. When eventually a valid Pope comes up, the Pope has got veto power. The Pope can say, you know what? All those bishops that were ordained when I wasn't around, yeah, I don't recognize any of them. Defrock them, they're back to lay people. And this used to happen around the 1400s, 1500s, because the popes were also vying for power. There was different factions, so whenever a pope came up, all his cousins, friends, brothers, and whatever became cardinals and whatever. Then another pope comes up to power and says, nah, all those guys were not really the right pope. And sometimes there was up to 3 popes, 2 of which were obviously invalid popes. And then whenever one of them won, he would get rid of all the other guys. So that's the rule. But if the Pope says nothing, those bishops are valid. And most of the time, throughout the history of the church, except when these power struggles were going on, the Pope said nothing, which means all the bishops that were elected, all the priests that were elected were all valid. So, is there a rule about how long an interregnum lasts? No, there isn't. It can last 1,000 years. There is no rule that says that interregnum has to end after X amount of time. And in fact, in the church, we've had periods of at least almost 3 years where there was no pope, nobody, literally no one even pretending to be pope. There was just emptiness. And guess what? The church carried on. There was also a period of about 70 years where there was 2 and even 3 popes vying for the throne, and nobody was really sure which one was which. So theoretically, for some 70 years, you could have been confused about, is there even a pope? Yeah. So this there's nothing really new. The only new thing about this is that since 1958, we have not had a valid pope. So we're still in interregnum. And the Satanists have taken over the entirety of the Vatican, which is why they have, cocaine-fueled homosexual orgies inside the Vatican, like Cocco Palmieri and so on, because they're not Catholics. They have all sorts of disgusting degeneracy going on in the Sistine Chapel. They do this, right? To desacralize everything, to make everything that was sacred, corrupt. But does this mean the church has ended? No. Are there still valid priests? Yes. Are there still valid bishops? Yes. These are the priests and bishops that did not accept Vatican II and the heretic clergy that goes with it. Now, there are essentially two, I don't want to say factions because they're both Catholics and they both believe the same things, but there are nuances in Catholicism. As a layman, for example, I can have a disagreement with another layman or even a priest about some concept that is not divine law. So if you're a Catholic, you have to accept the Trinity is the Trinity. If you're a Catholic, you have to accept, for example, you can't force people into marriage. If you're a Catholic, you absolutely cannot force somebody to become Catholic. They have to choose it of their own free will if, once they hit the age of reason and so on. So, the point is, there are certain rules of Catholicism that you absolutely must follow, but there are shades of, we all agree that's the rule, but how does exactly it work? You could have your own opinion about it, and there's nothing wrong with that. So the two main, let's say, theological theories of Sedevacantism are one position, which is the position I hold and which I think is logically absolutely correct. You cannot deny that this position is correct, which is what they call, we're all 1958 Sedevacantists. I'll get back to that. But the totalist position says, look, anyone that promotes Vatican II, as per cum ex apostolato officio, is not Catholic, is a heretic, and we don't consider them in any way relevant. I'm going to interject a little thing here. One of the lies that the enemies of the church say is that, this book abrogated cum ex apostolato officio because cum ex apostolato officio was a couple of pages detailing a bunch of stuff, and that's been reduced to Canon 188 Part 4 that just says, I'll read it to you so that I get it exactly right. I don't want to paraphrase things when I've got it right here. So Canon 188 states the following: any office becomes vacant upon the fact itself, and without, let's be very clear, any declaration by anybody, by tacit resignation, in other words, by silent, the fact itself, by silent recognition, by tacit recognition, let me read it again. Any office becomes vacant upon the fact and without any declaration by tacit resignation recognized by the law itself. So this rule itself is all that you need. No one needs to declare anything. Nobody needs to have a little judgment about it. And then it says, if a cleric, and part 4 says, publicly defects from the Catholic faith. When you start to promote heresy as Catholicism, you have publicly defected from the faith. So they're saying, that's all it's saying. It's not saying all the stuff of cum ex apostolato officio. Nonsense. Keep in mind that this document has summarized and condensed 40-something thousand documents of the Catholic Church. And it is a pristine document of brilliant, logical Roman law. That is all you need to say to draw all the conclusions that are in cum ex apostolato officio. And in fact, cum ex apostolato officio is referenced under Canon 188 Part 4. So it's not abrogated at all. It's just been summarized in one line because that's all you need. Because again, cum ex apostolato officio was basically saying, if a guy does this, he's no longer Catholic. And if he's no longer Catholic, you mustn't treat him like a Catholic. And let's just be clear that anybody that falls under this rule is a heretic and should be treated as a heretic. Let's make that clear, and I'm going to identify it even more. But really, all you need to say is, when somebody stops being a Catholic, guess what? He's no longer a Catholic. Okay? And public defection from the faith is public, so you can't deny it. Okay? And that's all that says. So Where was I? Right. So the only clergy that is still validly Catholic are the ones that have rejected Vatican II and rejected all the fake popes and therefore all the fake clerics and all the fake clergy, so-called, of the Novus Ordo Church. So what does that mean? Well, what is a Sedevacantist? The totalist position is what I've just said now. Then there is the Sedeprivationist position, which was a more charitable view of things by a theologian who was very well respected, Father Gerard Delauzière, who basically said the fake popes that have been voted in are not popes spiritually, they're only popes materially speaking. It's nonsensical, but at the time it was sort of like a way to sort of say, look, we're not really 100% sure yet who's a complete heretic and who isn't, and maybe some guys are confused. So if they come out with it and sort of say, hey, look, actually accept that these are the rules of Catholicism, we can sort of forgive their error and, they're going to be valid popes. Not a single one of them has done that. It's now been, 60 plus years, nearly 70 years now. And none of them have recanted, none of them have repented. And even if they did, once you have become a heretic, once you've acted publicly as a heretic, so let's take Vigano. People are saying, oh, well, Vigano's so brave, oh, Vigano's a real Catholic. No, he's not. Vigano, by the way, has got a PhD in canon law. This canon law, not the fake one of 1983, this one, the original 1917 one. He's got a PhD in that. Which, by the way, you don't need a PhD for this. It's a very clear, simple, very clear document. But he's got a PhD in that. And he was quiet for over 50 years about Vatican II. And now he's pretending to be a good Catholic. No, I'm sorry. You were a heretic for 50 years. You kept quiet about a whole bunch of pedophiles and whatever. So guess what happens? Under cum ex apostolato officio, if you were ever a heretic and then you repent, the Catholic Church accepts that you may well have repented. Great. But guess what? We're not going to trust you to have authority over anybody. A heretic who has repented, a clergyman who is a heretic who has repented, can continue to be a clergyman in a monastery with authority over no one, spending the remaining days of his life in perpetual penance. That is the rule. Okay? So even if Vigano had repented, which he still hasn't apologized, which he still hasn't said all those fake popes are fake popes by name, naming every one of them as fake popes, he still hasn't actually done that as far as I'm aware. But even if he does, guess what? He should retire to a monastery, be quiet, or write his writings, but he's got authority over no one. He can't even give the sacraments to people. Okay? Let's be clear. And that is what being a Catholic is about. If you are a clergyman of the Novus Ordo, as I call them, the new orcs, they call themselves Novus Ordo, new order. Why does the church suddenly have to be new? The rules have never changed. They've all been the same. So they're the new orcs, same as the old orcs, the Gnostics, the magicians, Simon the magician, all those guys that were back then, even at the apostle times. Same people, same thing, same ideologies. And by the way, it's not new for the church to have almost completely defected. The Arian heresy, something like 97 to 99% of all bishops believed the Arian heresy, and then it got overturned. Why? Again, it's miraculous, isn't it? If you think about it, there is no institution created by human beings that lasted as long as the Catholic Church. And keep in mind, the Catholic Church has not ended. It's still here in the Sedevacantists. The closest thing is the Roman Empire, and that lasted for about 800 years at a stretch. We're going 2,000 years strong. Have there been ups and downs? Have there been dips? Have there been things that should have wiped the church out? Yep. Did they? Nope. And you think that this is bad times? Nah, this is pretty good times compared to the times of Nero. Yes, Bergoglio is shouting at the Sedevacantists, they're saying that, Muslims and Jews and Buddhists can all go to heaven, but not the Sedevacantists. Yeah, kind of tells you something, when you're getting bombarded all the time. It means you're over the target when people are shooting at you. It's hilarious to me that the fake Novus Orchians, there's quite a few of them online. They're all paid shills, by the way. They all make their living talking nonsense about Catholicism, pretending to be Catholics. Taylor Marshall is one of them. Emo Jones, as I call him, is another one. Michel Voris, or as I call him, he's finally been outed. I've said this from the beginning. He likes to call himself Michael Voris, but really his name is Gary Voris, of the so-called church militant, who was gay before, gay during, and gay after he got outed, and it was all fake, it was all nonsense, it was all about money. Taylor Marshall was a Protestant who's now trying to use the same Protestant things to pretend that he's a Catholic. Emo Jones says that Bergoglio is a pope and writes very fiery stuff, but guess what? Each one of these guys is being financed by the same guy who finances Opus Dei. Opus Dei is basically like the secret service of the fake Catholic Church. So they're all being financed by the same guy. And it's pretty funny once you see the ins and outs of it. So it's very interesting to me that Bergoglio hired an Italian journalist to write a book, Sedevacantists, to try and get rid of the Sedevacantists, trying to blacken their name. And Sedevacantist churches keep growing. There's standing room only in the chapels, churches, people's houses, and even hotel rooms that they use to do the mass, the proper mass. And what do I mean by a proper mass? Oh, but I go to a Latin mass. It doesn't matter. If you, in your mass, whether it's a Latin mass, which it should be, you have the name of a fake pope who's a Satanist joined in with the most sacred of the sacraments of the Holy Catholic Church, guess what? That is heresy. That is sacrilege. So it has to be a non una cum mass, which means a mass where the name of the pope is not linked to the prayers and to the mass. Why? Because there is no valid pope. That is the totalist position. So are there churches, are there chapels that you can go to that are proper Catholic churches? Yes. You go to luxvera.org and you can find them there. Or you can also go to a site that my friend Tony put, which I'll try and put in a link to it in the bottom. I forget the name now. Is there a proper Catholic church in every country on earth? No, not necessarily. I've got a couple, very good friends, who've recently had a baby. They're from Finland. They went to get sacraments, baptized, confirmed, and married in another country, just so they could do it under the Catholic Church with a Catholic priest and a Catholic bishop and so on. Sometimes you have to travel far to go to Mass. Yep. But guess what? The Crusaders sometimes only had Mass once a year. So good enough for them, good enough for you, right? And is it hard for you to get to Mass? Great. So what? Do it anyway, right? So there is no argument that the Novus Orchians have to say Sedevacantism is invalid. And there's some idiot now that has been saying, oh, it's really dangerous to have Mel Gibson talk about Sedevacantism on Joe Rogan. No. And now, did Mel do a good job of presenting Sedevacantism? I suppose so, because he did it in a very simple fashion, very direct, and he's speaking to the Joe Rogan audience. So, fair enough. He couldn't get into the details. He just laid it out pretty simply in a basic fashion, which is good enough for the masses, right? It gets them awake. And he's got a huge reach, right? And he's busy building the second film, The Resurrection, which is, that one I'm going to watch. The Passion of Christ, I haven't watched it, not going to. It's just too brutal for me to look at. And people that know me will laugh at this, saying, but you're a pretty brutal guy. Yeah, I am. Guess my wife watched it. I was like, dude. And you know what? It's a funny thing, but like I've spoken to special ops guys that have been in combat, and they're all of the same persuasion as I am. They're like, if somebody is familiar with the actual violence, the thing of seeing 2.5 hours of a guy being tortured to death who is completely innocent is just, I can't, it irritates and hurts my sense of justice to a point that I can't really handle it. But I will watch the one about the resurrection, which is busy finishing off, I think. So it's great that Mel Gibson, being a Sedevacantist, espounds his position. But this guy whose title on YouTube is something like, "Oh, Mel Gibson's really dangerous," talking about Sedevacantism on Joe Rogan. And the stuff he comes up with is all lies. He tries to pretend that, the Catholics put Roncalli on, even though they knew he was a Freemason, because they didn't want Siri on. Just nonsense. Utter nonsense. He just pulls out of thin air. It's got nothing to do with any of that. Again, I've said why Roncalli was an absolute anti-pope, and there's no one that can argue that point. I've explained that, no, by the way, the church has not defected. You do not need for the Pope to be in the Vatican, and you do not need the offices of the Vatican to all be filled with proper Catholics. You don't. The papacy was not in Rome. He was in Avignon for like a good long number of decades. And there was never a rule that, the rule that, oh, you have to have this many cardinals and you have to have this many whatever. A lot of those rules got made by the fake popes, so they're not valid. They don't count for anything. Just like the new code of canon law that they did in 1983, which is, if you read the document, it invalidates itself. It's absolute trash. It's illogical. It contradicts itself, and so on. It's not Roman law, and it's not any kind of Catholic thing because it got created by Satanists that are not Catholics. So there really is no argument. Well, why aren't you guys electing a new pope? Because, first of all, to do that, you would need to get all the bishops that are left, valid bishops, to get together in a conclave and elect one. And Sedevacantists, or Catholics, as I like to call them, are essentially a minority. We're not down to the numbers that were in Nero, but maybe 100,000. I'd say conservatively 100,000, optimistically maybe 1 million. But the numbers of Sedevacantists keep growing daily. Like literally, if you go to Sedevacantist church over the period of a year, you'll see it balloon, and it's all young guys. A lot of them are young guys with lots of kids. I'm having my sixth child being born at the end of May. The families of Catholics we know, they've just had other babies and are having more. So, and not all of them are young. I'm in my 50s, and we're still having a sixth baby. So, and so we're gonna overcome the stuff. We're gonna form little communities of proper Catholics who will become as self-sufficient as possible. That's what I'm trying to do here, and so on. But that is why Sedevacantism is the only Catholicism left. Now, what if you are a Novus Ordo believing Catholic that thinks, "Oh, but a real Catholic, what are you saying? I'm not a Catholic." No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you're a Novus Ordo clergy, you're not a Catholic. You can't use the excuse of ignorance because supposedly you're a priest. You can't tell me that you don't know about Vatican II. If I, as a layman, have figured it out, you're telling me that you, as a guy that supposedly went to a seminar, to a seminary where, let's pretend it wasn't, a gay orgy place, and they actually instructed you and deceived you. You didn't do your own work? You didn't do your own homework to figure out what Vatican II was? Really? No, I'm sorry, I don't accept that. That's either criminal incompetence or deceitful pretense, right? So if you are a Novus Ordo clergy, I consider you an absolute heretic. If you're a layman and you've never heard of these conversations before, you've never heard of these topics before, and you continue pretending to be Catholic by going to your Novus Ordo fake church, then you are guilty of both ignorance and sloth. Because now you've heard about this and you're not looking into it, you are guilty of sloth, the sin of sloth, which is a mortal sin if you do it to that extent. But let's say you don't hear these videos. Let's say you've never heard anything. Let's say you were born into it, like all of us were. I wasn't born into Catholicism. I came to Catholicism much later in life. And I used to think the Catholic Church was absolute trash and full of pedophiles because, well, what most people think of the Catholic Church is that. But it's just not the Catholic Church. It's a satanic inversion, fake Catholic Church. That's the problem. Um, so, when I understand when people say, "Oh, but the Catholic Church is full of rubbish," and yeah, the fake Catholic churches. Go and look at actual Catholics, and if you're a layman that believes you're Catholic because you don't know any better, because since 1958 you've only seen and known fake mass and fake Catholic priests and so on. How do we see you? How does the Catholic Church see you? You're considered Catholic. You are considered Catholic. You are in error, but it's not through a fault of your own. Now, it does become your fault if you've listened to all of this and then you ignore it and you don't even bother to do 20 minutes of research to see if I'm just making shit up or if it's real. Then you are guilty of the sin of sloth, right? But if you've never heard about this stuff, you're not guilty. For example, let's say I go to a valid priest and I go and take my sacraments, a little beknown to me, that guy, makes satanic rituals in the back, doesn't believe in the Catholic Church, and, makes the host invalid and does all sorts of perverse things to it. I'm ignorant. I don't know that the guy's a fake priest and he's doing all that evil stuff. I believe, and I'm going there with a good intention. I'm not guilty of anything. God doesn't punish you for the evil that somebody else does pretending to be a priest if you don't know about it, okay? So you are considered Catholic. But once you become aware of it, if you don't make the jump to proper Sedevacantism, i.e. proper Catholicism, then you are guilty of the sin of sloth. You're still a Catholic, but you are in error, in deep error, and pretty dangerous error. So that's the rule. Now, what about the SSPX? Well, the SSPX is completely logical, just like the SSPV, because why? They're the guys that say, well, Bergoglio is Pope, but we're not going to listen to him because he's a bad Pope. That doesn't exist in Catholicism. If a Pope is the Pope, as far as faith and moral goes, he doesn't try and deny the dogmatic rules of the Church. You got to do what he says. You got to respect that he is Pope. Now, he might be a despicable human being, but as far as the jurisdiction of the Church goes, the rules of the dogmatic rules of Catholicism goes, as long as he doesn't try and invalidate, the rules that have always been there, he's a valid Pope, and you got to accept him as Pope. You might not like him, and if he comes up to you and says, you need to do this, you don't have to listen to him because he's not speaking ex cathedra. I don't have to do what a Pope tells me just because he's Pope if it goes against my conscience. I do have to follow the rules of the Catholic Church that a valid Pope says are the rules of the Catholic Church. That I do need to do. So again, let's be very clear about that. So now, I think I've answered all the queries about it. But one of the reasons, like I said, that we don't vote in a new Pope is because right now we're a minority, and as the numbers grow, and eventually there will be enough people that realize what Catholicism is and that the Novus Ordo Church is fake. At that point, there will be a natural revolt, and they will say, you guys are fake, get out. And you don't want any of those guys back into the real church, which is why there's the rule that if you are a heretic, you're never allowed to have authority over anybody ever again. Because how can you believe a Satanist? How can you believe somebody who's become the opposite of the Catholic Church and then says, no, but now I'm a good guy again? You can't trust that guy, right? Now, as for those of you that are saying, but the Vatican II documents are not heresy, you're lying. No, I'm not lying. And I said, I've written the details in my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church. There's a link at the bottom of this. Go look it up on Amazon or go buy the digital copy that's a bit cheaper and read it. They are absolute heresy. They invert dogmatic positions of the Church that are inviolable. Okay, there are divine laws. For example, as a Catholic, which again makes perfect sense, right? It's logic 101, as Wooly Ram says there in the chat. Not A is not A, and A is A. It's very simple. So, you can't have a rule that says, that as a Catholic you can whatever pray with Muslims or believe that they go to heaven too or whatever. No, if you believe that the Catholic Church is the truth, anything else therefore is an error or a lie, and you can't accept that as being correct. It's like maths, right? 2 plus 2 is 4. You can't you can't simultaneously say, yeah, 2 plus 2 is 4, but you know those guys that say that 2 plus 2 is 3? They're cool too, and their maths is just as good. No, it isn't. And the minute that you accept that 2 and 2 is anything but 4, you collapse civilization. You collapse the entire structure. Because guess what? Even if your error is 0.0001, you try and build bridges and have bending moments and, you know, skyscrapers, and that error gets magnified and magnified and magnified, and over time it just becomes a total chaos, which is what the Satanists want. So I believe I've covered now what Sedevacantism is. Oh, sorry, the position of the Sedeprivationists today is essentially what they're saying is like, yes, Bergoglio and all those clergy act as heretics, need to be treated as heretics by the lay people and the valid clergy, because that is what they're doing. They have no authority because they are acting as heretics, but I, in my private little heart, cannot denounce them as heretics because only God knows the real heart of man. It is a very charitable position, and it is a position that you can have on a personal level. But unfortunately, it is not a logical position that you can have in the external forum. Now, what does that mean? The external forum is what all of us can see and judge for ourselves. So, if Bergoglio starts sacrificing babies on the altar, that makes him no longer Catholic. And it really doesn't matter if he's just really disturbed, gone insane, and deep down he really is a Catholic and God forgives him. It doesn't matter. We, as mortal, fallible men, can only go by the actions that we see before us that are absolutely clear and are not Catholic. And we therefore have to treat him as a heretic. Absolute. Now, both the Sedevacantists' totalist position and the Sedeprivationist charitable position agree with this. You can only go on the external forum as a human being. It is true that ultimately only God decides who goes to hell or who doesn't. And it may well be true that a few of these, misguided priests, bishops, whatever, cardinals, perhaps are through invincible ignorance or some other reason, God might forgive some of them and allow them to get to purgatory instead of directly to hell forever and ever. Perhaps. But guess what? I don't have to worry about that. Because I'm not God. Just a human being. And I'm going to treat you as a heretic. Why? Because you've acted as a heretic. In public, you have defected from the faith. And there's no coming back from that. Bye-bye. It's not a little error. You didn't make a mistake. Somebody corrected you and you went, oh, damn it, you're right. Sorry. You didn't do that. You're perpetuating the heresy of Vatican II and the Novus Ordo fake mass. You are a heretic when you do that, publicly knowing what I've just explained in this video. And that's basically it. And I'm sorry, but there really is no response to every single detail of Sedevacantism that they've tried to pretend is not how I said it is in the book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church. It's been out since 2020. There has not been a single person that has been able to deny or disprove any of the things that I say in there. So, until further notice, when any of these Novus Orchians tell you, but, go buy that book, hit them over the head with it until they get it. Yeah. Now I'm going to quickly go through the chat, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to repost this video or a version of it. Maybe I'll splice in a few things as well for the Substack, just because I think it's a very important topic and there's a lot of lies out there. So I'll probably cut out the bits here that are not relevant. Hello to all of you that have said hello. And Woolly Ram says, every flavor of Protestantism merely repackages a heresy already refuted by the Church. Yeah, in fact, that's exactly what they do. Merg Muggle Maxis says, so practically every document since the Church was effectively founded by St. Peter. Yes, that's what this document does. It's looked at pretty much every document since the foundation of the Church by St. Peter. And all the rules of the Catholic Church are in here up to 1917. So if you want to have a complete set of all the rules of the Church, what you need to do is this document plus any papal encyclicals that were issued from 1917 till 1958, which essentially means the documents of Benedict XV and Pius XII. That's it. Those are all the rules that the Catholic Church can possibly, have. Sam Wettup says, "Are your henchmen still there?" One of them was here recently with the girl that he's courting, and they come and go. Like the most loyal henchman that was here for a year, he's now married, has got a new baby, doing quite well in another country. He did come to briefly visit after his wedding. I haven't met his baby yet, but I hope I will soon. When I was a bit frozen, Ironic Keyboard says, "Admiring the action pose he's frozen in now." Rural internet has a suspicious timing. Should we leave and come back? And then I came back. Sam Wettup says, "I have rural internet service and it's not that bad. You have Dago internet." I agree. I can't complain about that. Willie Ram says, "A simple example is how church discipline changed over time." Indeed. Amit says, "Yes, with the Eucharistic fast, for example." Willie Ram says, "During the three popes' time, even saints disagreed on who the pope was." And then he says, "Basic logic, not A is not A." Ironic Keyboard says, "I thought Mel Gibson was a Sede." He is. He's a Sedevacantist. But he presented it in a very superficial way, let's say, which is understandable because, again, Joe Rogan listeners. I mean, when has that guy gone into depth about anything except possibly DMT and how you should take drugs to expand your brain? Gaijin TV says, "Konnichiwa from Japan." And Ironic Keyboard says, "Good presentation, Mr. Kurgan." Okay, so that's my presentation, and for the Substack video, I'll probably cut it off here. There's 20 of you, so given it was a completely impromptu, I didn't really give anybody any warning. Very cool. I now open the floodgates of live streaming so that you guys can ask anything about any topic. It can be on this. If you need any clarifications, now's the time, because I will gladly add any clarifications or any questions you guys have about Sedevacantism or any particular detail that you're not sure of. Fire it out here, and I'll tell you not only the view of it, but I'll tell you where to go and look it up. Again, Reclaiming the Catholic Church has got a huge bunch of references, and it's 530 pages, so it's a lot of stuff in there. If you want just the overview, Believe, 98 pages, you can read it in 2 hours, but that's converted a lot of people to proper Catholicism. Or, if you want to talk about guns, different calibers, farming, I'm busy building a chicken coop, which I'm going to try and put up some pictures and so on the blog eventually, soon, I hope, because otherwise I'll forget. And I'm trying to build a pretty decent thing. I bought it a year ago, I think, this giant chicken coop thing. It's about 8 meters by 3 off of Amazon. It was like a few $100. But it obviously needs a lot of work. The place where I want to put it, when it rains a lot, it floods with about this much water. So I want to put it a little bit higher and I have to build kind of a floor for it, put down more netting that prevent animals from getting in there and so on. So that's what I've been busy with. And it's really cold now, so it's quite heavy work out there in the freezing cold. I used the tractor to plane out the blade at the front that kind of graded the field a little bit to make it more level. But okay, here's some questions. Willie Ram says, "How would you present the Sede position to an average modern heathen, not a Protestant, some dude or girl?" I would start out generically with the Catholic Church being the most beneficial thing that has ever happened to the human race. And they're going to go, "Well, what are you talking?" If they're anything like I was, they'll be, "What are you talking about? Those bunch of pedophiles? The Dark Ages?" And I'd say, well, let me correct you a little bit on what you think the Dark Ages was. Yeah, we came from a place where women and children were chattel. We're brutally killing people for the minor offenses was considered normal, where slavery was totally acceptable, and it was Catholics that changed all of that. That Catholics that changed the position of women, Catholics that made it monogamous marriage for life, which protected the women and the children. It was Catholics that said that the primary purpose of marriage is to create and raise children. It was Catholics that stopped slavery. It was Catholic monks that invented the scientific method of doing things, the actual proper scientific method, not the current politically motivated and financed scientific method. Catholicism is based on justice regardless of your station in life. Of course, it doesn't always play out that way because humans, but the principle of Catholicism is that as a Catholic man, it is your duty to defend the innocents, regardless of whether you're related to them or not. And it is the position of Catholicism that if you don't look after your own family first and foremost, you're worse than an infidel. You're worse than a non-believer. So all of these things created societies, in actual Catholic societies, you don't need a lock on your front door because nobody steals, not because their hands and their heads are cut off, but because the belief was absolute and clear. And the death penalty absolutely is part of the Catholic dogma, and it should exist because certain crimes deserve absolutely the death penalty. Not giving the death penalty for certain crimes invalidates the victim, invalidates the dignity, the human dignity of the victim and of the perpetrator. Because, if you're raping little children, you should be put to death. Society does not need people like that in it, and it should be absolutely the law that you get put to death for certain crimes. That is logical and normal. But I would start out with the Catholic Church is the greatest thing that's ever happened for humanity. And they're going to, and you got to have your answers ready for all of their objections. At which point, when they say, but Bergoglio, and you say, oh, wait a minute, I said the Catholic Church. I didn't say the fake Catholic Church, I said the actual Catholic Church. And then you can seg into Vatican II. I have convinced people of the veracity of Sedevacantism in a half-hour conversation. It does take at least a half hour to get into some of the details. But over time, if they're people that you see regularly, they will start to realize the truth of what you're saying, if they're in any way interested, because, if they don't care, then. Ironic Keyboard says, I know there are some arguments about which Sede churches are valid and which aren't. How can simple souls such as myself tell the difference? Essentially, you need to, the simple answer, which requires a bit of reading, buy yourself this book, okay? In fact, if you're a digital guy, you can find a digital version of this. It's about $35, which is cheaper than, this is, I think, is about $60 on Amazon. Buy yourself the digital version, which you can search digitally, and, read it. It's not difficult. It's a pretty simple document, okay? It's very logical, very clear. And if a bishop or a priest does not follow canon law and they're breaking it, then ignore them. Now, most Sedeprivationists and most Sedevacantists, priests and bishops, absolutely do follow canon law. There is one bishop that does not strictly follow canon law and has made some errors. And I've mentioned this in my blog. It's Bishop Sanborn. I've identified on my blog, thekurganblog.com, that's the new address now, what the errors are. But he's still a valid bishop. He issues valid sacraments, and his priests issue valid sacraments. His ideology, he's basically a bishop of power. There are Rodney Stark talks about this, and he talks about the bishops of, bishops and priests of piety and bishops and priests of power. So, for example, in the Catholic Church, there have been a lot of, corrupt popes, priests, bishops that were like just money-hungry, power-hungry guys. They were collecting money from indulgences and so on, saying, hey, just give us money and like your dead relative will go straight to heaven. And they were collecting that money and abusing of it, of course, no doubt. However, the collection of all that wealth and so on allowed the creation of huge gigantic churches, the expansion of the church. So there was an element of that which grew the church in extent, allowed the gospel to be spread through and so on. Of course, bishops and priests of power are not my preferred people, and they tend to skirt the lines of Catholicism pretty close to the bone, and sometimes they go against it. For example, they can deny sacraments to people who don't respect their authority, but there's no pope, so you have no authority. So, and that's one of the errors that Sanborn was guilty of. So it all catches up with them in the end. But of course, I very much prefer bishops and priests of piety. And I know priests like that personally and bishops like that, and they are awesome, awesome, awesome people. So it's really quite simple. Are they following canon law? So the couple of simple rules. One, do they reject everything to do with Vatican II? Do they reject all the fake popes? And do they reject a una cum mass? In other words, the mass must not link one of the fake popes with these guys. Oh, and another point. But the Eastern Rite. No, there is no Eastern Rite. The Eastern Rite is just as heretic as the Novus Ordo guys, because they recognize Bergoglio and the Catholic and the Vatican II and if you don't reject all of the fake popes and all of the heresy of Vatican II, you are a heretic. Full stop. Nothing to do with anything. If you're having an una cum mass, you're making a sacrilegious mass. So Regina says, lost access to my books and probably can't get any replacement, but the boot is helpful these days. I'm not sure what that means. Sedevacantist says, chicken coop build, solid. Well, I don't know if it's solid yet, but I'm going to put down little foundations for it. I've cut down like some tree trunks to put as the beams across it, 5 beams across this way and then shorter beams along the other way and so on. Sam Werb says, I mean no harm by Dago. Dude, like, I'm going to get offended now. I'm going to cry. This is a bad word. No. Your Roman ancestors invented engineering. I love all the Italians who grew up with steel work in town. Fantastic food, beautiful women. Yeah, dude, don't worry about it, I mean, I had a video on YouTube that got, like, zapped. And you can see it on BitChute if you go to the Kurgan or whatever on BitChute. It's video number 114, where I basically take the piss of every nationality on the planet. So I just took in 8 layers for rehoming. 8 chicken that lay eggs for rehoming. Okay, cool. I don't know anything about chicken. I'm expecting there's going to be a chicken holocaust as soon as I get some. They'll probably all die or something. How can Japan get rid of the USA influence? Dude, if you figure it out, let me know so that I can apply it in Italy as well. We've got just as many military bases here of the USA as you've got. DWL, changed my name. Oh, Woolly Ram, I'm glad you're alive and well. DWL, if you are who you are, I think that we know who's controlling your Telegram. And I've been having a little bit of back and forth. I don't know if you're now that same guy impersonating DWL, or if you're the original DWL. If you are the original DWL, do try to get in touch, just because my wife is worried about you, and I'm a little bit worried about you too. If you're the imposter, well, we know that you're an incel that is trying to control somebody by very foul means because you're a Freemason. So that's where that is. So DWL, do let us know. But I think the real DWL probably doesn't have access to her phone or anything else. So unfortunate as that is, I don't know if there's much that we can do about it from way out here, but let us know. And there's now 26 of you. It keeps growing, just like the Sedevacantist churches. All right, boys and girls, so shoot any comments you want, any questions you have on various topics. it's the high priestess. I hope so. If it is, please get in touch. You've got my email. The new blog is thekurganblog.com. I think you've got my Telegram. And if it is the real one, well then, do get in touch. We are worried about you. We hope you're okay. I don't know what's going on there with you, but it looked pretty ugly, put it that way. So, yeah, I probably shouldn't be talking right now. I think you should. Get in touch with my wife. You don't have to get in touch with me. She's worried about you as well. Find a way. And if we can help, let us know, and we will do whatever we can. Nationalist just hopped in. Sedevacantist says, I gotta go though, have a nice night. You too. And seriously, do try to get in touch. Good luck. Sedevacantist says, yeah, I'm setting up a full back row of seats behind the roos each Sunday. Oh, we're growing. Cool. Excellent. How goes the olive oil business? Well, I've got the olive oil all tested for the phenotypes and whatever the hell. And now it's convincing. I can't get in touch. Please try. Please do somehow. If you're on here, it means you've got access to something. I will say thanks to her. But, let us know what's going on. If you need help, tell us. We'll figure out a way to help you if you need help. Pews. Yeah, I know what you meant. Olive oil. I'm trying to now convince I have to get back in touch with the olive mill. They need to get an FDA code, which they're all hesitant to do because the guys that I had agreed with that do have an FDA code closed their oil mill 2 days before I got my olives picked. So I had to go to another mill who don't have an FDA number, and now I have to try and get them to do that so that I can export it to the States. If I ever manage it, don't worry. I'm going to have a video about it where I tell you all to buy all my oil. Okay. So, yeah, unfortunate, but that's where it's at. And do please buy all my books. Do subscribe to the Substack. It all helps. And, there's some pretty behind the scenes things going on in my life, which I can't quite talk about yet. I will eventually be able to, but they're just taking a bit of a toll in time, money, energy. It's all good, everything's cool with my family, but there are outside forces that are trying to cause problem, which it's something that's been ongoing for a long time. So it's nothing new, but it's just starting to grate on my nerves a bit. Samuel says, another specialty crop you can grow annually is sunflowers, useful and very beautiful. Yeah, there are some sunflowers that grow here naturally, but the thing is, the problem that we have here is that, in Italy, there are, unless you literally fence off the whole area, which is 5 hectares, pretty big fencing costs to do, and they have to have a specific type of fencing. People can sort of wander through your land, hunt through it, do truffle thieves. That they're not allowed to do truffle thieving, but they come and do it until I catch them, then they stop. So, there's a lot of animal action and movement. We've got deer and porcupines and badgers and boar that come here and they will eat anything that's not fenced off. We've got a small vineyard. And we've got the olive trees, which are pretty much, they just kind of do their own thing, and you don't really have to do much. But it's not easy to plant a whole crop that and keep it safe from all the other stuff that can happen, including the chemtrails, the weather manipulation. In 22 we had. 23 was it? I can't remember now. Yeah, 23 I think. They made it hail in July. It's ridiculous. This year, everybody started to collect their olives at the usual time in October, beginning of November, and they got only 9 liters per 100 kilos of olives. As a coincidence, because the guys that were supposed to pick my olives let me down originally. Well, not the guys, the leader of the guys let me down, but then the guys themselves actually did show up. They only showed up after they'd finished everybody else that were on their books. So it picked really, really late. But as a result of it, my olives were better than everybody else's. I got like 14 liters per 100 kilos. So, you know, it's like win and lose sort of thing. What kind of species of deer have you there? I don't know. They call it the dino here. It's deer, I think, is what you would call it in English. I don't know. I'm not. You know, if you're asking me about African antelopes, I can rattle all them off. But the European ones, I don't know. Woolly Ram says, do truffle thieves just dig around, or do they use snuffing boars? No, they don't use boars. They're not allowed anymore. They use dogs, and they cause damage and they steal stuff, you know. So, and they come at like 2 in the morning or whatever. But have you talked about the California fires? If not, any thoughts on them? Oh, yeah. Well, you know, all you have to do is, let me see. I'll tell you what. I think I have it on my Substack. I think I put it on there. There's a picture. Really tells you everything you need to know about those California fires. They were absolutely created by direct energy weapons, no doubt in my mind. You can see, like, literally all the houses burnt down to ash except the houses of like Tom Hanks, Oprah Winfrey, you know, the known ones that have certain proclivities when it comes to children. And the other amazing thing is that you have all the trees all around are still standing. Really? So it's quite the thing. Where did I put it? Hold on. Let me just see which post it was where I actually posted a picture of this. I'm trying to remember which one it was. No, not that one. Wildfires at the beach. Yeah, exactly. You know, like in Maui, right? There were the boats were burning in the sea. But like the houses of the various people, and I think the governor of California has already admitted this video of him saying that they had the whole of Los Angeles needs to be like rebuilt, and they have already the permits to like do all sorts of stuff, and they're gonna try and get the where the hell are we? And they're going to try and get all the people whose houses got burnt down that were not insured because, I don't know, all the insurers took off the insurance from these guys for fire insurance, by the way. You know, same thing that happened a little while ago with the flooding at 2,000 meters or 2,000 feet, whatever it was. From a tornado, supposedly. Did I put it? Was it on the Substack or was it on the blog? So hold on, let me just check. Maybe it was on the blog that I put it. Yeah, oops, forgot to fill the reservoirs to fight the wildfires. Yeah, exactly. It's absolute nonsense. Oh yeah, sorry, it's on my blog. Oh, well, by the way, it's quite a good post actually. It's a good one for you guys to read. So I'll put the link here, and you can see the picture there of what it looks like. So another specialty cropping. Sedevacantists says vaporized houses. Exactly. Weather's weird here. Bone dry and painfully cold at night. Yeah. The Gavin fires. Wildfires at the beach. Yep. Oops, forgot to fill in the reservoirs to fight the wildfires. Exactly. You know, I mean, you guys know as well as I do. Probably better than me because most of you are Americans. Sam says, good night, man. Hard day. Very welcome live chat. I'll come back to watch the rest tomorrow. Have a very good night, Sam. Gavin the Great already said they're working with legal to make way for the new owners to develop, basically. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Gavin needs to clean the wood chipper. Yeah, indeed. So, yeah, more of the same. Clown World doing what Clown World does. No surprises there for me. And actually, the one thing I do think about the California fires is like, I actually really feel sorry for Americans. I think, and when I say Americans, I mean the actual American citizens, like yourselves, people that live there. You guys are under the most brutal regime of foreign invaders that have taken over your country long ago. And the stuff that's happening in your country is, I think, a preview of what they want to do to the rest of the world, but I think you're the test bed. So, I think there's a whole bunch of Africans in like third world countries that are a lot safer than you guys are. So Sedevacantist says, I'm here in Northern California, 1 mile from my church for the win. Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah, and I sincerely hope you guys, Sedevacantists out there, front lines is in California for sure. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing what I'm doing here. Build little communities of Sedevacantists that are self-sufficient, as out of the way as possible, so that you don't attract too much attention, especially at the beginning. Get your own water, get your own food, get your own energy production. Eventually, I know I keep saying this, but it sounds crazy, but it's not. You need to think, how do I get completely independent of fiat money? Because fiat money is absurd, right? A small bunch of people decided that they're going to invent this thing called money that they create out of thin air. They give to the government at interest, and it's debt for everybody except them. And everybody's going along with it. It's absolutely insane. It's tied to nothing. It's not tied to gold or silver or oil or oxygen. It's tied to literally nothing. So it's complete nonsense. But people live and die because of this fiat money. And whole wars are created because of it. So, you have to try and be completely independent of it. And if you think about it, in cave times, did people need money? Did they have fiat money? The Romans and the Greeks and whatever, they had money, but it was like based on actual metal and things that have some intrinsic existence, at least, if not value. So, Nationalist says, yeah, good way of putting it. We are the test subject to the New World Order, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So the Vacantist says, Sunday we had a 3.9 mag earthquake, literally right at the consecration during Mass. Wow. It's, yeah. Ironic Keyboard says, I'm planning to move closer to a Sede parish that's in the right place. Thankfully, I can work from anywhere for the time being. Well, Ironic, you know where we are, so. OK says, never noticed before. Have I finally lost the plot, or do you have a slight Welsh accent? I think you need to stop drinking. But I've been accused of having a German, a Russian, a Scottish accent. Funnily enough, not really been accused of having an Italian accent. But no, I don't think I have a Welsh accent. I've got a little bit of a throat like pain, so that might be a bit of a thing. But yeah, no, I think just put the tequila down, man. Welsh, I mean that's quite the insult. I'm quite offended. You can call me a dago, a spick, or what, but Welshman, that hurt, man. That hit me in the heart. So, yeah. What else have I got to tell you guys? And here I thought your accent was from Detroit. What the hell? I mean, come on, guys. Just because I told you I said if vacantism works, don't get all nasty on me. Oh, I haven't done my Jebediah Lovemore accent. So it's decided I've lost it. Yeah. No, I quite like doing the southern accent, you know, Jebediah. I need to put my hat back on and have another chat with, what's his name? What's the name he goes by? Billy something. And we usually do the whole stream in heavily southern accent, which is quite fun. I quite enjoy doing that. And I think it comes out all right. We usually have like a silly one about stuff, but yeah. Whatever happened to the fine Jebediah Loveman? Oh, you spelled Jebediah with a Y. What are you, some kind of Zionist? No. Jebediah. IAH. You know? Yes, Lovemore, indeed. Well, let me just transmute old Jebediah. It's not the right hat, not the right glasses. He's a conservative gentleman. He wouldn't be seen dead with this. Maybe a string tie, but, you know, not a hoodie, surely. And not a beanie and not red glasses. Good God. Somebody might take him for a fancy man, you know. But yeah, what could Jebediah say? I suppose Jebediah would talk about the positive points of a revolver, comparing it to a semi-automatic pistol, which can jam on you, you know. And for all the fancy new revolvers, a good old 6-gun single-action Colt, or in fact, you know, the part brass, part steel Southern 1851 Colt Navy, that is the most beautiful handgun that anyone has ever created on God's green earth. And although the fully steel one is the better weapon, the more long-lasting weapon, because as you know, when the war of northern aggression started, the Southerns didn't always have access to steel, so they had to start building their 1851 Navy handguns with some bronze. That's right. So, and that's right. Jebediah don't do fancy pants. That's quite correct, Mr. Sedevacantist. Just like to point out, of course, that Jebediah, despite the fact that he's Southern, is, of course, Catholic gentleman. He has cordial relations with the unfortunate and misguided Protestants of the southern states. But we all know there's only one true church. Hopefully you all know that too. And you know, the lies that have been spread by the devil in the South of numerous and fallacious and evil. Just plain evil. There you go. That's my transmigration into Jebediah for a little while for your entertainment. I really do enjoy our little chats, especially because they're not just one-sided. I know the whole first, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes or something was just instructional, but like I said, I just need to clarify a couple of points. And happy to cover any more topics that you guys may have. I'll take a sip of water while you throw any more questions or comments or things at me. Indeed, Mr. Ironic Keyboard. I don't know what a keyboard is unless it's on a grand piano, of course, but we should keep praying for the poor, misguided souls of our Protestant neighbors. I fully agree with that. That's absolutely correct, sir. And that is the pious thing to do. Of course, if they get too uppity, you gotta smack them upside the head, but, you know, we reserve that for a later iteration of their unfortunate errors. It seems like whenever the accent comes on, about 10 guys drop out. So there's a lot of Yankees in this here thing. The other news is that I finished. They stupidly, while Well, a loyal henchman was here. I forgot to do the videos that go with that book, the Systema Part 2 book. The second book on Systema is finished. I just need to do the videos for it. And there's also another little book that I've finished, that's in Italian. I've got to do a few corrections before I put it up on Amazon. But yeah, well, maybe you're all ran out of steam there. If not, hello Caleb. I'll be sure to catch up later. Cool. And by the way, one of you subscribers, I know this topic was probably covering some of that, but I'm happy to do subscriber only video, but at least 2 or 3 of you let me know what you want me to do it on. I did say if we had at least 10 subscribers, we would do subscribers only videos, which we can do. I want to do it, but tell me what you guys want, because the whole point was I would do it based on what one of you guys wants. So I tell you what, even if it's just one of you, let me know what you want to do a video on. For the subscribers only, I'll do it. We'll keep it probably quite short because there's not a huge number of you. Although I'm also going to say, any of you that do the yearly subscription to Substack, I will also consider as though you are subscribers to the YouTube channel, because Substack gives me a better percentage than YouTube. So if you're one of the yearly subscribers on Substack, just ping me an email or message on Telegram or whatever. Let me know what you want me to do the video on, and we'll do that. Antarctica. Oh, I run a keyboard. Yes, sir. You picked a good one. I agree. We will do a subscribers only video on Antarctica. Yes. I agree. I absolutely agree. And I'm thinking, how will the subscribers on Substack get it? Maybe email. Maybe we'll send them a link or something to it. Make it private and send them a link to it. Yeah, that could work. But yes, Antarctica. Very good topic. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I'm actually going to do a bit of collect my random notes that I have all over the place and make it a good one. I will absolutely do a video on Antarctica there. That'll be great. Thank you for the suggestion. Anything else? About anything? No? Yes? The perfidious penguins need conversion. I like penguins. I've never found them to be perfidious. Neurological lies that we think are true. Can you expand on that a little bit more? Like what exactly? Paranormal spiritual realm. Wow, that's a huge topic. Can you narrow it down a little bit, Caleb? Neurological lies that we think are truth. So do you mean like when they tell you, I don't know, like for example, that babies can't see when they're first born, or that they can't smile? Do you mean stuff like that, or do you mean like the sort of cognitive dissonance that some people have about various things? Can you just clarify a little bit better, Willie Ram, what exactly you mean? Oh, that's interesting. I'm actually, one of my old scars is like, for some reason, irritating me a little bit. In Caleb, paranormal spiritual realm, again, can you narrow it down? I mean, what do you want to talk about? Like ghosts, life after death, fairies? There are so many things that could fall into that category. Give us a little bit more of a indication of what you're looking for. I know there must be a bit of a delay, and I can see there's rural internet because there's people popping in and out all the time, and I'm assuming there's some internet variance here. Holy Ram says, like, what are the most common neurological lies, those that are in place to make us chain ourselves? Oh. Ah, okay. Are you talking about neurology or the zeitgeist? Because one of the, it is a lie. I don't know that it is a neurological specifically lie, but one of the main points is you are not your personality. Your personality is an amalgamation of a bunch of things, which most of which can be changed. And most people never do, or they only change a little bit, very gradually over very long periods of time. But you can change your personality quite radically. Usually that happens as a result of traumatic, what they call C, significant emotional events, which are usually traumatic. So it can be a good significant emotional event, quite rare, usually a pretty tragic one that eventually has positive effects or negative effects. Ironic Keyboard says, need to run out for a bit. If you're not still here when I get back, thanks for the stream. You're most welcome, sir. And yeah, no, nationalist says, past and future lives is an interesting topic, but I'm down for an Antarctica stream. Yeah, we can do past and future lives if you want. It is, strictly speaking, the Catholic Church does not look well upon discussions of that topic, but with some corollaries, I'm happy to do it. Caleb says, I'm thinking about proofs of the paranormal spirit realm versus the bullshit that is so commonly sold as proof online. Willie Ram says, happy trials, ironic. I think he means trails, but, more apt for today's day and age. Again, Caleb, narrow it down a little bit. What specific bullshit are you talking about? What specific proofs are you talking about? Again, you're just very vague, very, very generic. So narrow it down to one or two things that you're specifically thinking about, because you'd even have to define what you mean by paranormal, what you mean by spiritual, what is your definition of that, what is your parameter for that, because your parameter for that is going to be different from mine and everybody else's. So we first need to agree what you mean by paranormal. When people say supernatural, I don't think anything is supernatural. I think that there are things that people assume is supernatural, but is actually part of the nature of things if you understand nature properly and the nature of things properly. So there are things that are uncommon. For example, you could say miracles are supernatural. I don't think they are supernatural. I think they're part of our reality, but they're very rare occurrences. So I understand, the what most people mean by that. But if you want to talk about a specific aspect of that, then you really need to refine it and define it a little bit more, But I'm going to wait another minute or two to see if Caleb can refine this a little bit further. And nationalist, I'm assuming that you also mean like past lives, as in the Buddhist sense, shall we say. Holy Ram says, I'd like a stream on the you personality issue. It sounds important to know and understand. Okay, we can do that. Very, 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 very briefly, I'll give you one story that I'm aware of two guys that were in the Vietnam War and had a very similar experience. Their best friend died in front of them. And one guy ended up being a nihilist, a drunk, like no aspiration to anything and just like a waste of a life. And his reasoning was, you can die at any time, everything is meaningless, and he just had a shitty life as a result of it. The other guy went the other way and sort of said, shit, you could die at any time, I better make the most of this. They were both significant emotional events, but the meaning that each one of them gave to it affected the rest of their life, one in a very negative way, the other guy in a very positive way. To a certain extent, the way you interpret reality makes that reality happen. And what do I mean by that? Do I mean that you're all wizards creating your own reality? Not really. What I mean is the universe, the world, life in general is far more interesting and has got far more options and has got far more things going on all around you all the time than you are aware of at any point in time. So your intention, your perspective, the meaning you give to events that happen in your life or things that you see or things that you feel or things that you hear can do absolutely color not just your experience, but they funnel and close off a whole bunch of other things that you would otherwise see or be aware of or take into consideration, or that would change or affect your life. For example, from the most like common, I don't know, if you have it in your head that things are always going to turn out okay, somehow, no matter how bad shit happens, you know that something will just come along that will fix your life up and make it better in some little way. Guess what? You're going to see a lot more opportunities than the guy who thinks, oh, life is shit and it's terrible and it just gets worse all the time. Why? Because your mind, your five senses, and the sixth sense or the seventh sense, if we have them, which I do believe we have them, will all be a lot more receptive to picking up, seeing, noticing, and engaging with things that can make your life better. And if you're closed off and you're only focusing on the negative, well, guess what? You're going to pick up more of, what you're going to see more of, and what you're going to engage with more of, right? It's the same thing. If all of a sudden you want to buy a red car, red is the color for you for a car, and you've got the money and you're just going to pick the right red car, guess what you're going to see throughout your day? You're going to see red cars fucking everywhere. And it's not that there's suddenly more red cars, it's just that you're picking up on the fact that there are more red cars. Yeah. That's how your perception of the world around you works, and your meaning, your filters that you can decide what they are, you can control those. Most people have no idea that they control their own brain. Most people have no idea that your brain controls your heart rate, your blood flow. And with a little bit of training, I can still now, even though I haven't been in a gym for 10 years, I can still control the blood flow in my hand to a certain extent. It doesn't really come out on video, but I can slow down my heart rate or speed it up without any external perception that is picked up by other people. You can do all that stuff just by choosing to see, think, and feel differently. So that's a pretty important thing to be aware of. Caleb says, I'll have to send you a private message or not. I'm sure, yeah. Ping me whenever. So I hope that gives you a little sense of what I mean by your personality. You're not your personality, and you can change your personality. For example, you can be, I don't know, irritated by something, and you can make a conscious effort to stop being irritated by that, or even start liking it. My kid, the two youngest girls are masters at doing this. When they do something naughty and you're like, stop that or I'm going to spank you. And, the 4-year-old, she's been doing this since she was 2 years old. So you're being quite serious. You're putting the right intent. You're saying, hey, that's wrong. Don't do that or you're going to catch a spanking. And at 2 years of age, she's like, come on, Daddy, smack my butt, and sticks it out. And it's like, just totally throws you, right? So she leaned into the serious thing and made it like a funny thing. And it's like, it just cracks you up to the point where shit, I've got to find another way to teach her discipline now, because clearly this doesn't work, So they're quite masters at turning things around in their favor quite, the girls especially are very, very good in doing it in the very deceptive sort of feminine way. The boy is really good at just using undeniable logic to like just and doesn't work so much with me because I use logic all the time, but with my wife he just like shoves it in there and like just opens up her whole argument like wait a minute, if that's that then this that, you know. He's just like he's really he's very forward thinking. He's a guy that, you know, you give them all chocolates and he'll go and eat half and then he'll put the other half in his fridge and he'll pick it up the next day, sort of thing. He's very much thinks ahead kind of dude. So yeah, well, I think I've covered those topics. We've been going just over 1.5 hours. So I don't know. I think I'm probably going to call it a night. Oh, because I've probably been going on longer than this because of the split. I think this time started to count again. So I've probably been going on for over 2 hours now. But thank you all for being here. So many of you on such very, on no notice whatsoever. So thanks for that. It's very cool. And I wish you all the best. I hope you had a good Christmas, and I wish you all the best for 2025. I think this is the first stream I'm doing in 2025. So Happy New Year. Very belated, but I hope you all, and me, all of us, I hope we're going to have a really good one. And that all your projects come through. Night Kurgan says out on a keyboard, good night to all of you. And may God bless every single one of you, especially those of you that might be having some difficulties. You know who you are. I'll going to say a couple of prayers for all of you that were in the chat. So good night, and may God bless every one of you.